Welcome back, Focus learners, to another explainer. Today, we're doing something a little different. We're taking a very unique journey together. I'll be stepping into the brooding yet absolutely enthusiastic persona of a soothsayer to guide you through a dark, mythic fable. And honestly, it holds a surprisingly profound cure for modern existential dread. We are diving deep into a philosophical space where creation directly meets destruction, and where the heavy chains of our daily burnout are completely shattered by confronting the void itself. Let's get into it.
Here is our map of the abyss. We'll be traversing 6 stages today. The deluded laborer's awakening, clash with the absolute not I, traversing the mirrorless nebula, the seventh solitude's guide, the monstrous synthesis, and finally, overcoming existential despair.
I want to start by posing a really stark question directly to you. What actually remains when the altars of reason turn to sawdust? Seriously, imagine for a second that all the dogmatic structures, the beautiful cages of societal tradition, and all those predictable orbits of your life just suddenly collapse. What's left when the stagnant piece of your daily routine gives way to a staggering, empty nothingness? That is the exact core crisis of meaning we're dissecting today.
Stage 1. The Deluded Laborer's Awakening. We're going to start by looking at a figure known as the Corrupted Knight. He perfectly represents a state of passive despair and slave morality that honestly, a lot of us unknowingly inhabit.
The knight actually confesses this himself. He says, "I was once a piteous laborer, a deluded guardian polishing a wall of law that existed only in the fevered dreams of my own submission." Before his awakening, the knight used his reason as this fragile ivory mask of logic. He just polished the rules and expectations of his world to hide from the staggering nothingness of reality. He was literally trapped on a treadmill of blood, clinging to Apollonian illusions just to maintain a fragile, stagnant peace.
But, that kind of passive despair just can't last forever. Which brings us to stage 2, clash with the absolute not I. This is where the knight's dogmatic illusions violently collide with the purifying silence of the void.
Look at the absolute stark contrast between these two opposing forces. Burdened by his frail reason and slave morality, the knight finally meets his ultimate adversary, the Crimson Jester. Now, the Jester embodies the absolute not I. He's this cosmic spirit of negation, wandering the absolute abyss of coal space. He eternally weaves the veil of Maya from the light of dying stars, which are the very illusions the knight previously worshipped, only to eventually tear them down. He is the Jungian shadow made entirely manifest.
And the wild thing is, the jester doesn't attack out of malice. Instead, he issues this brutal truth, saying, "I am the rigid, calcified barrier that gives your chaotic will its shape. I am the friction that allows your internal fire to ignite." This is a completely necessary parry. The jester's blade is a tragic catalysis. The absolute void essentially acts as a rigid wall that the knight's chaotic, suppressed will must crash against, so his internal fire can finally actually ignite.
And that brings us to a massive philosophical concept, the Anstoß. It's this subterranean collision, the exact moment a sovereign will finally strikes the rigid stone of the universe. When this collision happens, that monolithic wall of law the knight used to polish just dissolves into mere sawdust. It proves that the sacred architecture of the universe was just a giant mirror all along. But rather than being a tragedy, the resulting ruins of this altar become the absolute ultimate canvas for self-determined creation.
Moving right along to stage 3, traversing the mirrorless nebula. Think of this as the metaphorical gateway bridging the total destruction of the old world and the birth of true self-mastery.
To cross this nebula, you have to face a dark sentinel. And I won't sugarcoat it. It requires an agonizing psychological death to shed your artificial ego and actually master the void. The traveler is forced to look into a glass reflecting 0 idols, compelling them to see the nothing behind the mask. Most who look within see only a grave and just perish in hollow suffering. But to survive, you absolutely must embrace that nothingness, realizing that shedding your false ego is the only way to claim true sovereignty.
You can really see the whole chronological ascent mapped out here. We track this dramatic rise, starting as the deluded guardian and piteous laborer in Phase 1, surviving the tragic catalysis of the Anstoß in Phase 2, enduring that brutal psychological death of the mirrorless nebula in Phase 3, and finally emerging in Phase 4 as an autonomous lawgiver, a sovereign architect who doesn't fear the void, but actually commands it.
Which leads us perfectly into Stage 4, the Seventh Solitude's Guide.
Stepping entirely beyond those beautiful cages of the celestial herdlands lands you in a domain of purely active nihilism.
So the seventh solitude is an absolute purifying silence way beyond societal tradition and that stagnant fog we call the spirit of gravity. Surviving out here requires absolute peak psychological resilience. To the celestial herd, this terrifying silence just looks like a prison of isolation. But to the sovereign architect, this domain of active nihilism becomes a literal throne.
Let's actually break down the two primary forces operating in this dark space. While the Crimson Gesture provides the external friction, the void, the absolute not I that forces you to face your Jungian shadow, the Soothsayer is entirely different. The Soothsayer is the internal voice of the Proto-Ubermensch. Using dark illumination, the Soothsayer doesn't prophesy a future granted by some external gods. Instead, it guides your Dionysian dance across the ashes, helping you impose your own sovereign will onto the ultimate canvas.
And that perfect storm drops us right into the heart of the infinite maw. Stage 5, the monstrous synthesis. This is exactly where the thesis of the knight and the antithesis of the jester merge into a terrifying yet beautifully creative harmony. The corrupted knight delivers this incredibly triumphant return thrust to the jester, saying, "Now I am the monstrous synthesis made flesh, an autonomous lawgiver born from the burning wreckage of your dogmatic ideals." He reveals that true mastery isn't about some sterile denial of the shadow. True mastery is wearing the cracked vessel of your human ego while actively harboring the wild, creative fire of the abyss inside you.
That nails down this vital concept, the absolute Ich, or the absolute self. It's the self-justifying will, realizing it has no master because it literally is the void, staring back at itself. In this vacuum of active nihilism, there is no objective moral law to divide us. And what that means is nihilism itself stops being a source of despair and instead becomes the ultimate tool for highly original, self-determined artistic creation. You become the will in R, the laughing will, positing your own existence simply because you will it to be.
Finally, we reach stage 6, overcoming existential despair. So why are we talking about all this grim, dark, Fichtean stuff? Why does it matter to you? Because the Sovereign Architect's journey isn't just theoretical philosophy. It is a highly practical blueprint for conquering your own burnout, passive despair, and dread in the real world. Let's walk through the actual actionable steps together. Step 1. Recognize the veil of Maya. You have to acknowledge the artificial, beautiful cages and that treadmill of blood you're running on, all those societal expectations completely draining your life. Step 2. Survive the mirrorless nebula. Be genuinely willing to undergo the psychological death of shedding that artificial ego. Stop seeking validation from the bleached heavens of outside approval. And step 3. Compose harmonious music from the ruins. Embrace the active nihilism of your freedom. Carve your own meaning into the cold meat of this disenchanted wasteland.
I'm going to leave you with this final provocative challenge from the Crimson Jester himself. Will your harmonious music survive the purifying silence? The dawn of the disenchanted has arrived, folks. It's entirely up to you to shake the fool's rattle, embrace your inner villainer, and dance upon the grave of your old orbits. Thank you so much for joining me on this descent. Now go build your throne in the void.